Good evening, sir.
Yo. This is episode 60 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast with your host, Brett and CH. Today's topics: Ethereum had a hard fork over the weekend. Looks like it worked, but there's definitely some things going on there that we should touch on. Enterprise blockchain fail. State Street is looking to axe their distributed ledger technology department. We'll touch on that and give a few takes. And then last but not least, this is very interesting news actually. The BAKKT CEO, Kelly Loeffler, is going to be joining the Senate, which that would be the first Bitcoin CEO related to a Bitcoin company that has become a civil servant. I don't know how else to put it, but she's starting that January 1. So that will be interesting, and we'll jump into that. But how have you been other than that, man?
I've been good. It's been an interesting day, as I explained to you earlier, but that's just that's just personal stuff. When I was reading this Kelly Loeffler thing, it said January 1st, 2020. I'm like, wow, it's so far away. And then I was like, wait, no, that's like 21 days or 22 days. It keeps. I know we've brought this up before, but it's really weird that we're already at 2020. And it's been 2 full years since we were in peak cryptomania.
Yeah, dude, it has been 2 years since the last time I felt complete euphoria, I guess is the best way to put it. Because it's December 10th, I guess. What was the top, like December 17th or the 14th or something?
Yeah, for Bitcoin it was, and like Litecoin. It's really funny, like the like Bitcoin, Litecoin, like coins like that popped and topped like December 17th all at the same time. And then basically Ethereum and all the other shit coins, all the ERC20 tokens and other things, whether they were on the ERC20 or whether they were on the Ethereum network or not, a majority of the other altcoins all peaked like between like January 1st and 10th. It was quite a time to be alive, to say the least.
No, yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's been 2 years. It's been 2 years. I guess at that point, December 2 years ago, the Crypto Humor page had been up for like 6 months, and followers were just flowing in like crazy because every person on the planet was tagging their friends in crypto and Bitcoin memes. So, like, yeah, things certainly have changed. And if you would have asked me 2 years ago if I thought the CEO of an exchange that didn't exist at that time, by the way, would be joining the Senate, or any of the other wild shit like Trump tweeting about Bitcoin once this year. I mean, like, a lot has happened in the last 2 years that I just wouldn't have thought it would have happened that way. Like, it really is mind blowing. So the time goes by no matter what. One of my professors in college actually told me that. He's like, the time's going to go by, so do with it what you will. And I guess in that time I read way too many fucking articles about Bitcoin and too many podcasts, and then we started a podcast, and I don't know.
We've red-pilled each other into some deep stuff where just what's real and what's not real is because we're about to talk about Ethereum here and the hard fork, and it's like I've been kind of just between traveling and other stuff and holidays, I haven't been paying attention to Ethereum that much, and there's not really much reason to. And we'll go over that in a second because we have the DApp radar, which is decentralized application radar, up too. But basically, Ethereum had a hard fork, like 2 weeks ago, week ago, something like that? Wasn't that long ago?
I think it was just this past Saturday. Just this past Saturday. I think the 7th.
It was I was looking at the created date for the hard fork, but I'll just read the abstract. So this made EIP, which EIP stands for Ethereum Improvement Proposals, specifies the changes included an Ethereum hard fork named Muir Glacier. This hard fork addresses the impending ice age on Ethereum network mainnet. It includes a commitment to solving the problems with the ice age more permanently. I was reading that earlier when I was going over the notes, and I saw ice age and Ethereum, and I was so confused. I didn't know if it was like people, because Ethereum's kind of more socialist and liberal, and it was like people trying to fight climate change with Ethereum. And so I was just but like that's kind of reverse climate change. They're trying to fight the ice age. And then I realized it was this. So that just tells you how up to date I've been on Ethereum.
It's funny because I debated whether or not this was a good topic because I don't really keep up on too much of what's going on in Ethereum world, but only do I get interested when I think there's something we could have like a takeaway on or at least talk about. And this one really just had to do with the difference between decentralized networks and centralized networks. And you made a good comment before we started recording, like you can kind of separate the two. One is more the, you know, go fast and break things, and the other is, you know, slow and steady wins the race. Don't do anything too crazy. Two different approaches, and one is certainly, in my opinion, better for building global sound money than, you know, some sort of world computer thing that doesn't really exist and
Doesn't work.
you know,
No
all
one
that.
uses it.
Yeah. All that good stuff. So, you know, it's two different approaches, but I think there's a few things to take away from that. And one is definitely the centralization issue. So just as you had said when you were reading the beginning of that EIP, they wanted to push back the difficulty bomb. And the difficulty bomb is the quickest way to explain it is just an incentive mechanism to push the miners and the network towards a proof of stake protocol switch. And you know, we can just leave it at that. But the point is that they realized the ice age, the difficulty bomb, was coming quicker than they realized. So they're like, oh, we should just push this back a little bit longer so that we don't bump into it, and then we have like a huge issue. And I think, yeah, EIP 2387 was created on November 22nd, which was literally just a few weeks ago. So it was written, presented, reviewed, and got into the upgrade for the hard fork in like 2 or 3 weeks, which is insane to me. Like the amount of time and review that goes towards very, very, very small Bitcoin related changes is very rigorous compared to like a cursory review of somebody's BIP that seems like it's pretty fucking intense. If you're delaying a difficulty bomb that's like has incentives baked in, it just really goes to show you how easy it is to implement a change like that. And if you're talking about if you're storing your wealth in something like that and you're not really quite sure how much of the total supply you have and if that can be changed in the future, that's not so great. So, you know, when you and I might talk about our HODL stack, we know that you have X number of Bitcoins out of 21 million, and you're 99.9% certain that that 21 million is never going to change. If anything, people are just going to lose more coins. So you'll have more of the total supply otherwise. But with ETH, you're just not really sure of that. I mean, they said there would only be more than 100 million tokens, and there's already like 108 million, and then they said there won't be more than like 110 million. So like just the fact that you can have that conversation is just makes the whole thing ridiculous. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
It's a malleable network. It's not, you know, as we've seen, like even in the past when Vitalik, this was a while ago, we're talking 2.5 years ago now, in June of 2017, Vitalik died, and I'm saying died, and I'm putting quotation marks in the air you can't see, but he didn't die. It was just like some hoax that he died. And like Ethereum price, this is when Ethereum price was dumping from the 400 initial peak in the summer of 2017. You know, it's clear that it's a pretty centralized project. If Vitalik, you know, got hit by a car tomorrow and died, it would be pretty devastating to any forward momentum in this project, and I'm sure the price would reflect that. And again, like we've discussed this before, but it's probably been a while, and I've looked at these DApp radar things in the past. It's probably been, though, almost a year. There's no activity, and we were kind of looking at this earlier, just joking around. The top 10 DApps right now, I'm just going to read them off because I don't even follow this anymore, but it's My Crypto Heroes, which category game, and it's on the Ethereum network. Prospectors games on EOS. EOS Dynasty games, of course, on EOS. Another Prospectors games on Wax, which I don't even know the Wax protocol. Rocket Game, which is gambling on Tron. This is the best, though. So the category for Hex, which is the scam led by Richard, whatever his name is. I shouldn't even name him. He's a scammer. But It's category high risk, and basically it's on the Ethereum network. But basically all it is, and it does have the highest volume, is 151K over the past, or 151 over the last 24 hours. It's basically a modern BitConnect. It's a certificate deposit on the blockchain apparently, and all it is, it's the same thing as BitConnect except not BitConnect. And for those who don't know, BitConnect was just a giant Ponzi scheme. So is Hex. They just want people to pour money in, and they're going to pay you out slowly. And hopefully more and more people keep coming in, kind of like Bernie Madoff, until his whole thing collapsed with the 2008 financial crisis. So that's the whole idea here. So stay away from it, please. And I'll keep going on the list, but it's Crypto Legends is the next one. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it, of course. It's a game, EOS. 888 Tron, gambling. It's on Tron. Wink, gambling, Tron. Nudex, exchanges on EOS. I've never heard of these. Their users are pretty low. It says a few thousand for each of these, 3.6 for the top one. But the volume of the network is nil, besides for a few of these.
Here's the thing. I'm not... if you would have asked me 2 years ago, or maybe 2.5 years ago, I would have thought that decentralized applications would have a lot of demand. That would be great. Of course, everything's going to be decentralized and then have a token attached to it. Of course, that makes obvious sense and doesn't cause any friction in the economy. That was really dumb. I can't believe that I thought that, but I did. And now when I'm sitting looking at some of this stuff, I struggle because I'm pissed that I kind of fell for it back in the day, so that I know more people will fall for it and new people coming into the space will kind of think the same thing again. So I think it's important to do your own research. Is a little bit of a cop out here because I thought I was doing my own research and it didn't work. But nobody's really using this stuff. And is it because we're in crypto winter still in a bear market? I mean, maybe. I'm just not sure how much demand that there will be for this kind of stuff. But who knows? Who knows? I think if this continues to we see a lull in volume of people using this stuff, it's 1,000 users here, 2,000 users there for a game or an app. It's just not enough. I don't see that stuff really taking off anytime soon, if at all. So when we think about, just to bring it back to the hard fork, and when you're dealing with a monetary technology, you need to be really careful when you do that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why we hopefully won't see a hard fork with Bitcoin, because you just want to keep it going and you try to add new features and functionality on top of the sound money and then go from there. Unfortunately for gold, fiat had to be used as, you call it, a layer 2 solution or layer 3 or whatever, and then you put Visa on top of that and MasterCard and then collateralized loans and all this other stuff as additional layers on top of the system, right? So and somebody put it to me that way, thinking about, gold is base layer, that's layer 1 sound money. It's great. Everybody should have an interest in gold from its monetary history and characteristics, its stock to flow, great heritage. 5,000 years it was used as money, great money, a lot of great times over that period. It's just unfortunate that in order to scale such a thing, just thinking about it objectively as a technology, you need kind of other things on top of it. And that's why we saw bimetallism, which I'd say as long as you don't try to fix those exchange rates, it could work. One for larger denominated payments or higher value, the other for smaller. So I can see that. And, I guess they're rocks, right? They can't really fork. But when you're dealing with software, it's important that that kind of stuff doesn't happen, because, with sound money, you want to be sure if you're storing your wealth in there, your hard work and sweat and blood into something that you're trying to take with you into the future, you're doing it because you don't really want that to change too much in the future.
Yeah, no, that's as you were saying, about rock and gold and silver, that's why people use gold and silver, and gold was a standard for thousands and thousands of years because it was hard to change the supply, it was hard to find, and especially up until recent years with the advances in, mining equipment and just industrialization. If you're mining gold in the late 1800s or early 1900s, you still didn't have the equipment they have today where they could excavate thousands and thousands of tons of earth, and then go through it and sift it and whatnot. And you could say the same thing about Bitcoin in the early beginnings, when it was just a bunch of nerds and people who were into basically these weird theories and stuff on money, who were fiddling around with it and mining it easily, versus even by 2014, 2015, the mining became tougher and tougher.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure we've covered this in the past, just those stages of something becoming money. You have your collectible, you have your store value, and then you have your medium of exchange, and then ultimately you get to unit of account, right? And if you read some of Nick Szabo's work, he's talked about this and how every money has kind of gone through that similar progression, whether it be beads, shells, rhinestones, gold, silver. You know what I mean? Like it, and these things do take time. And I think, as you always like to put it, like with the cat out of the bag with digital scarcity and proof of work and Bitcoin, it's you're watching something become monetized in real time, and we have access to the internet now, and you can see that reflected on the charts as the price takes these wild swings and has these bubbles that keep going up and up and up, and it keeps bubbling up. But that's, nobody on the planet has gotten a chance to see something be monetized over time, because it just took so long for everything else that has been money in the past. So like, I think regardless whether Bitcoin works or not, we'll have lived through a time when we tried to see a free market for money and something was monetized like right in front of our eyes. It is pretty fucking crazy.
It's just, again, it's internet money. And I think the perfect book for anyone who just kind of wants to understand Bitcoin on a technological perspective and really understand where it puts its place in history, because a lot of times these things we think in such short time frames. We think of Bitcoin in the past year or 2 years, and now or we think about where's Bitcoin going to be a year, but we're not thinking where's Bitcoin going to be in 20 years.
Right.
It's the Internet of Money, Volume 1 and 2. I don't know if the third one's came out yet, by Andreas Antonopoulos. It's a short read. It's easy. You don't have to know anything about blockchain or crypto, and he does a phenomenal job putting it in layman's terms and using phenomenal analogies just to break it down and kind of give you an idea. Like, I always like to use the Internet because the Internet didn't happen overnight, and you could really draw the Internet's early beginnings to late 1800s when you had initially Telegram, the communication, because you need that. And then eventually the late 60s with TCP IP protocol. And then eventually in the 70s and really 80s, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's ARAP net or AppNet or whatever, which was the government basically building a messaging system, the U.S. government, building a messaging system so people could communicate, or basically military bases and institutions could communicate in the case of a nuclear attack, etc. If telephone lines go down. And then finally in 89, 90, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, there you go, was working on the internet, and that was at Champaign, Illinois, if I remember correctly, right?
I think you might be right about that. Yeah,
it's
I forget,
University of Illinois,
right.
Champaign, but that's where it really, and that's where Netscape came out of and everything. I can't think of the guy's name who was working on Netscape, but.
Mark Andreessen.
Mark Andreessen. And then by 93, the internet was like, okay, but even then in 93, sending an email with an attachment was an, oh no, and now we send emails with attachments without thinking, we stream things, and it's 26 years later. So
right.
Things have changed, and same thing will happen with Bitcoin, unless people stop working on it, which I don't see happening, because right now, obviously, there's an incentive because one Bitcoin equals $7,244, which is quite a bit of money.
Right. And no, that's a really good point. I think people will continue to work on it because there's an incentive to. On one hand, I think a lot of very smart and liberty-minded people have gotten very wealthy from Bitcoin. You can take the the CEO of Kraken, Jesse Powell. He's like, full blown libertarian. Definitely enjoys the enjoys the freedoms that are still available in the United States, and I'm sure definitely wants there to be more, and does not. He doesn't do business in the state of New York, as an example, because of the bit license, and just refuses to play ball. And you're going to see people like Trace Mayer and others who will really fight for, I hate to blow it up this large, but like the freedom of just humanity in general. And I think they think there's a lot at stake. And just like you and I probably think that there's a lot at stake too when it comes to the separation of money and state. So I just don't see people really giving up that easily. So I think we're going to see this kind of stuff continue. And, for things like the shitcoins and other stuff, I think it just comes with the territory, and it is okay to experiment, and people are going to get burned on certain things, or maybe they'll make money overnight. And it's happened to a bunch of people, and a lot of people have also lost everything, like putting all their money into BitConnect and mortgaging their home. Yeah, I mean, like it can get pretty insane, but I just think you made a good point there. Like, people aren't going to stop. I think the train's left the station, and it's really more like who wants to get on until then.
Yeah, it's the Pandora's box. It's the same, it's the same thing with nuclear technology. It's like, oh, yeah, these people over here are dropping atomic bombs. What is this? So, and that's a pretty, I don't know if the analogy is the correct thing, but it's a similar thing. It's the same thing with firearms. It's the same thing with cars and automobiles. Like I'm just gonna draw an analogy, and I still need to see the movie, but the Ford versus Ferrari. It's like, oh, what are these guys doing over here? They're making the GT40 that much better than the Ferrari GT B or GTO 250. It's the same thing. It's, how can we improve this? But so we will see with time here it'll be interesting to see in a decade where we are. And I know it seems like a long time, but it's not. It's only 3,600 days roughly.
Do you think we'll still be recording in a decade?
I would hope so. Dude,
it would be fun if I hope so too.
Joe Rogan's podcast has been around for a decade.
I mean, that's true.
Like, if you watch his first episode, like, I think I sent you the video. I was like, dude, like, we could make it places. If Joe's first episode was like this, and it was an absolute shit show, then we have a hope. There's a hope. No, I don't ever plan on being that big, but I just enjoy recording this because I enjoy talking about stuff like this, like markets, money.
Not yet.
And then also, we just live in the peak of times. Like,
oh yeah,
there's no way around it. Like, without free money, there'd be no Instagram ass models. Without free money, we wouldn't have this insanity in sports. Where we get these gigantic contracts coming out. We wouldn't have President Trump without free money. It's just that simple. It literally, it's the reason we are in this weird time, and it's almost a new decade, is because we've had not only a decade of free money, but we've had that years prior. But the last decade's been far worse.
Right. I guess that's something we try to touch on when we talk about, when we left the gold standard in 1971. A lot of shit has kind of changed since then, and you can track it back to like almost exactly that time period. The crazy part is as much as I think, the kind of current financial system is getting closer to its last legs, although I can't put a time frame around how long I think that lasts. Like, it still took 50 years from delinking from gold for shit to like get really wacky. So, like, how much more time does it take? And I guess, the only reason I'm thinking about this is because it's like, where will Bitcoin be in 10 years? It's hard to say, because as human beings, we can't really think in exponentials like that. Like, the first time I got on the internet when I was a kid, like on AOL, I didn't foresee a device in my hand with a touch screen and like a DSLR like camera that I could also call and hit a button and cars would come pick me up. You know what I mean? Like, you can't think that far ahead. How would you know? at all.
No,
So
it's
like for someone to think that there's no possible way for there to be a money without it being backed by the state, I could see how you would think that there's just no way that that's possible. And then you kind of forget that it was like that for thousands of years, and gold was a great money, and everybody came to the conclusion to use gold as money like on their own, and everyone's like, oh sick, you want to use gold as money too, great, because like humans like rare shit, that's why we went with gold. I mean, it's not really rocket science for a lot of that stuff. And I just hope that that continues, because it would just be great for humans in general.
No, it's when we look at it, we've talked about this in episodes before. It feels like technology has just stopped coming out, and like new inventions, stuff like that. And free money has to 100% to do with this. I don't know if I sent you. I was reading a good article about it, but like basically how the last decade, so many companies have continued to report. You know, this is a little off topic, more of a macro thing, stock market, etc. Like they continue to hit their earnings per share (EPS) numbers. They continue to hit numbers, all the while not producing anything else, not reinvesting, their money. It's either all their money is being used for buybacks, paying out, top managers. They're not people who founded the company. They're not original investors. They're just managers and, people have been put in place who are just reaping tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars off this. And then lastly, dividends. And I have nothing against dividends. That's, but I think buybacks should be illegal, because like Apple is going to buy back all its stock by like 2025 at this rate. It's ridiculous. Like there's going to be no float left. There's going to be no trading of Apple stock. It is absolutely insane. It's like, how do these stocks keep going higher? Because the number one, the only net demand in the past decade has been companies buying their own shares. Companies buying back their own shares. Everyone else has been a net seller. Everyone. Endowments, pensions, retail, you name it, institution. Everyone, you can look it up. It is absolutely insane, and it's a part of the reason like why we don't see companies reinvesting in capital expenditure, whether that's research and development, you name it, new factories, new tools. None of that's happening, and you can kind of feel it in a sense, when things aren't being developed really. And I'm not one to say anything because I'm not building shit over here right now. I'm not creating the next invention, but I'm just saying, we aren't in this time period like the 1880s through the early 1900s where multitudes of technologies were coming out that spawned other multitudes of technologies.
Yeah. No, and I think just the way you put that is a good way to segue into the next topic, because and the next topic's just this enterprise blockchain fail.
Enterprise
and
blockchain.
When you think about how, just as you said, they're not reinvesting and they're buying back shares, and if they are investing, there's so much malinvestment out there that they're investing in dumb shit. And you can see that very clearly when someone like State Street basically unloads 100 blockchain developers as they rethink their blockchain strategy. And as someone who works at a large global company who also has a blockchain strategy, I can tell you that it hasn't gone anywhere. And they didn't do too much hiring from like getting blockchain developers on board, if such a thing even exists. And it just ended really quick. Like it came and went in 2017, and then I didn't hear from anybody on the project all of 2018 or all of this year. So that malinvestment happens all over the place, and I think we're seeing, we're seeing kind of the tail end of it, and the really wacky stuff, things that we like to make fun of, like WeWork and scooters on the blockchain and enterprise blockchain. It's been enough. And I think when you think about the progression of just like how far it's been, you can look that now, we talked about this on previous episodes, how governments are now getting into the blockchain space, right? We have China, who China has like a full blockchain strategy, and you and I always kind of speculate is like this is the blockchain kind of that next thing that they're going to switch to? Are they going to switch to a blockchain kind of cryptocurrency as they default on everything and just everything evaporates and they move over to a new monetary system like a panopticon? And you're seeing the private industry, they're kind of done with blockchain. They're done with it. They're getting rid of everything. They don't need to have a blockchain strategy. State Street in particular is kind of switching their focus on tokenized stocks and bonds, maybe on top of a blockchain or whatever they think that means. And it looks like they're trying to jump into that space and stable coins and custody, which makes way more sense to me than trying to rebuild your entire back-end infrastructure on a Google spreadsheet, which is essentially what it is when you say distributed ledger technology. That's nothing more than a Google sheet.
I'm so tired of seeing like enterprise blockchain. I'm glad like IBM stopped running those ads, and like I think they blasted those ads in late 2017 and 2018, the IBM blockchain, and it was all this bullshit. Excuse me. It's just like the same thing we see with like self-driving tech. Another example of technology where it's like they've been all this hype around self-driving technology, and reality is Tesla's system is. I train with a guy who's really in depth with the cars, and he knows all about this. Problem with Tesla's thing, and I have nothing against Teslas. I actually know someone that has one, and it's actually super nice now. And I was like, I don't like him personally, but I was like, shit, that thing's actually pretty fresh. And they're wicked fast and whatever, but they use a camera, and so if there's so the camera's like, and that's what causes some of these accidents when there's weather or lighting issues, and that's why like you get people in Teslas going 70 miles an hour and slamming into a semi truck because the camera doesn't see it because of lighting, and so other cars are using lidar, which is laser something radar, and then other things to sense. But again, self-driving tech, the reason they're doing it, and this is getting off topic a little bit, is because like the problem is they've realized that we're just far too distracted when we're driving, and it's just known. I mean, everyone has a smartphone, and like everyone's guilty. I do my best just to put it away, and if I have music, I queue up the playlist and let it be, or a podcast, you name it. But like, it's insane because we've been told all about this grandiose of whatever AI driving, self-driving tech, and they don't really perform that well on the roads. They really, and then if you throw in any kind of bad weather, it's game over. So it's like, it's another thing. It's just like in the 80s, we were told we are gonna have flying cars. Back to the Future has lied to me. I want my hoverboard, okay? And I don't have one. And it's 2019, and I was supposed to have one in 2015. So it's something, I guess back then they thought we were going to propel into the 21st century at just some astonishing rate, and we didn't, of course. And it's like, and the same, I think the same thing with self-driving tech. It's just like, and here's an interesting thing. In the 50s, they knew putting radios in cars would cause distractions for drivers. The only way to safely drive is no distractions, like nothing. And that's the reality. And of course, here we are, and now we have all these touch screens in all the new cars, and it's an effing nightmare, dude. I hate it, because like the second something goes wrong, I have to freaking fiddle with the touch screen, which means I'm not on eyes on the road. So, little rant there.
Yeah,
but...
no. But it's just a good point about talking about this technology, and this was getting shoved down everybody's throat in 2017 and 2018 about enterprise blockchain this, enterprise Ethereum alliance. We're going to rebuild our whole back-end infrastructure, and all this stuff is going to be put on the blockchain because it's more efficient, and just like all of this weird stuff that you can see that just not happening. And I like your analogy when it comes to autonomous driving, because that's something real that everybody knows about and can think about. When you've been hearing about autonomous driving and autonomous trucking, and oh my god, all these people are losing their jobs or going to, and blah blah blah, and it's like we haven't even come close to that yet. And just like everybody thought blockchain was going to be this brand new thing that just reinvented the way current businesses did business in the future. And what I think will end up happening is that if there are businesses that can utilize a public blockchain for something, say like Abra, who runs an exchange that's like they use Bitcoin as collateral, and you can buy fractions of Apple stock and other stuff. It's just interesting to see how someone takes a current business and then uses the actual technology to build a business. And you can see the private industry trying to keep spinning up their own private blockchains and just tossing it because it's not sticking. There's no savings. It's too expensive to have that switching cost, which is exactly why you saw private intranets in the early 90s just fail, and then everybody ended up using the public internet anyway. And it just took time, right? Everybody wanted to monetize that on-ramp into getting access to the internet, and they thought because it was public that was bad and we would never be able to do anything on it. And now neither one of us bats an eye when we get into the car from someone that we called on the internet for an Uber ride, or all of our banking on our phones and all this stuff. Like, people are using credit cards on the internet every second of every day, and some people still won't because they're afraid, and people were petrified to do something like that in the 90s. They're just like, oh, the public internet, like, that's super scary. And now you don't think twice about it. So as we said, it's just like all this shit takes time.
Oh, yes, everything takes time. Dude, when I think back to the hype like 2 years ago, maybe a little over 2 years ago, I think at this point 2 years ago, my realistic expectations kind of started to set in, and I think it was really Christmas time, like right at Christmas, when my phone was just blowing up because I didn't have that many followers, but a lot of people personally knew I was in crypto and were hitting me up out of the blue. I like knew my step cousin is a pretty smart guy, and he's in private wealth management, a little older than me. I think he's your age. He was like, it's getting a little bubbly. I'm like, yeah. And of course we were within like a few days to a week at the top, but prior to December of 2017, especially in the summer when I first really started to go deep down in summer of 2017 to crypto, and I was into it a little more in the spring, but really in the summer and in the fall, it was like, oh my God, look at all these new technologies and all these dApps being built in Ethereum. Holy shit, look what's happening. And I think you just get caught up in all the hype, and then when you bring, the prices increases in, it obviously doesn't help. It makes it easier to believe these things are going to happen. But I think when you start to see, especially after Thanksgiving, when I got back at school and I'd be out at bars and people were telling me they're buying Litecoin at $100, and I'm like, oh, and it's like that's when I was like, okay, I don't know how much longer this is going to last, because it's like everyone's hopping on this boat, and they can only hold so many people.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought it was like new paradigm. Like, that's it. Like, here we go.
Exactly. New paradigm. We're going to do it, baby. And
new paradigm. We're doing it.
Happen.
It's just a plateau happen. that will hold somewhere, and everyone's just going to slowly want to adopt this thing, and that was kind of it. Yeah, embarrassing to admit, but like, I mean, for those of you listening who haven't been through a bull market, it's fucking unbelievable. Like, you have emotions and feelings that you just didn't think were possible. There's really no other way to explain it. It is unbelievable, and you won't forget it, and you're going to tell people about it, because that's how insane it is. It's just, it's like in the air. Like, you can fucking feel it. It's like electric. I remember being like at work in the office, and one of like the older guys, one of the boomers, was like, dude, he's like, this is what it was like in 2000 and 2001. He's like, I'm telling you. And I'm like, well, it must have been awesome in 2000 and 2001. Like, everybody was getting rich. Like, it sounds fantastic. I mean, and he kind of was right. He nailed it. Like, you need to have felt that euphoria before in something else to know when to recognize it. And since that was kind of my first time feeling it, I had no clue. I don't know. I guess that's like a bit of a tangent there, but it's like just something important to keep in mind for the next time you might be feeling a certain way, if and when the bull market decides to rear its.
Feeling some type of way.
Yeah, man. It is something else. What do you think? Should we jump into this BAKKT CEO news?
Might as well.
Yeah. So Kelly Loeffler, the CEO of BAKKT, who they do the physically settled futures here. Yeah, she was appointed to the U.S. Senate by Georgia governor, who I think he's like sick or something and needs to be on leave. And I think her term.
I was trying to figure out how she got appointed.
It was something like that. Like she's only in for a year, and this guy's done in 2021 or 2022, and she would have to run, and raise money and run for the next time if she wants to do it. So, I mean, regardless, from what I understand, her first remarks, obviously she said nothing about Bitcoin, and I don't think I would either if I were her. But I just think for one, it's mind blowing that the CEO of a Bitcoin related company is going to join the Senate. But secondly, I think the likelihood of this kind of thing continuing will increase because there's just going to be a lot at stake, and there already is a lot at stake for people with a vested interest to see Bitcoin succeed. Will start to insert themselves. Yeah, I mean, she wants her bags to pump. Like, if she wants to bring jobs to Georgia and make Georgia a great state to do business, if you're in the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency space, that brings jobs. That's good. That's even not that I want to see anybody get more tax revenue, but there are things that you can do if you have an interest in, whether it's pumping your own bags or just human freedom and liberty in general. Like, people will start to gravitate towards this, just like we've seen Warren Davidson talk about shitcoins in Congress. Who's the other guy? Kevin.
The Democrat from
McCarthy.
Sherman, Brad Sherman.
Oh yeah, well Sherman, he's from California. He's like, obviously thinks it's the worst because he understands how it can break
threatens the dollar. He threatens all of the U.S. Basically threatens what's made the U.S. a superpower for the last 50 years, pretty much since 1971. I mean, yes, the Soviet Union was still around then, but the USSR collapsed in. The anniversary is coming up. It's December 26th, 1991. It's a funny time. I don't know why I always remember that date, because it's like the day after Christmas, and it's such it's like, oh, the day after Christmas is the end of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So
what a gift, right?
What a
Christmas
gift.
Present.
Thank you, Santa.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how just as we say, like, sometimes the snowball starts getting bigger and it picks up speed. And just like I said in the very beginning of this episode, if you would have asked me in 2017 if the CEO of a Bitcoin related company would be a public servant, I would have just not believed you at all. Because why would that happen? And somehow or another it did. And I just think it's first of many. And just like Trace Mayer and Caitlin Long are doing fantastic work in the state of Wyoming, I think it'll kind of spread from there, and other states will adopt the new digital asset related laws that Caitlin Long and Trace Mayer are putting together there to make Wyoming an even better state to do business in. And that will just spread. And I'll tell you what, don't underestimate Bitcoiners pumping political or politicians in general who
have a vested interest.
Pro Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, it's just there's no shot. And some of these people are already billionaires, and they will make sure. That's just legitimate. I'm sure Roger Ver was a billionaire at one point. Trace Mayer is definitely a billionaire. The CEO of Kraken. Like, there's a lot of people who are rich as fuck who will have absolutely no problem making sure that people who will pass the laws through that they need to make sure that they either don't go to prison or that will be beneficial for doing more business, they're going to get put into place. And I think that is it just is what it is. And everybody kind of needs to be ready for that. And I think this is just maybe it was dumb luck. Maybe it's something conspiratorial. I have no idea how she got it, but I just think it's something. I just think it's something to keep in mind. Like, don't be surprised if this happens again next year, and we have a topic about it, or it starts getting into debates at some point. When the number grows large enough, all of a sudden, then it starts to matter. Again, be thankful. Bitcoin's cheap, relatively speaking, super small. Nobody really gives a shit about it. Nobody thinks it can resist the state. I'd like to keep it that way for as long as humanly possible, so we can stack as many sats as we want and figure out what we're going to do after that.
I don't know if we've read this off earlier, but it was pretty interesting. I was just reading the bottom of this. It says it remains unclear who will take over the helm at BAKKT after Loeffler takes a new position on January 1st, 2020. However, the current COO and former Coinbase executive, Adam White, would be the natural successor. A spokesperson did not request a comment. That's pretty interesting. It feels like Coinbase people are just everywhere in the space. They were at Coinbase at one point, and now they're somewhere else.
Yeah, I think anyone who worked at Coinbase who kind of realized what Coinbase was up to and that they were falling into shitcoin casino realm and weren't necessarily being a strong actor, I think a lot of those people have moved on.
Yeah.
Either to do better things in the industry, or
just sit on.
You have so much clout from working at Coinbase that like you can just get a job.
You can walk into anywhere and get a job. No,
right.
Really. Oh yeah,
So,
I worked at Coinbase in 2014, and
yeah. I mean, it's insane. Yeah, I mean, the Coinbase office is in San Francisco. You know, I see people wearing Coinbase shirts when I'm downtown and stuff like that. Like,
Jesus Christ.
yeah, it's wild.
Did you give them some Tezos?
No, but I'm sure those guys they're staking. I can't imagine what it's like working for Coinbase if you've been there for like, I guess 3 years now. Like, you've seen some shit if you somehow still have a job. And like, I'm sure some really remember when they like Ninja launched Bcash, just like so much.
That was the craziest thing when they ran Bitcoin up to 4K and then it just dumped and all the. I remember there were so many people bitching on all these because I was in so many of these like Telegram, Facebook groups, etc. And people were whining because they all bought Bitcoin Cash, which they were told was the next Bitcoin at like $4,000 or 3,500, and it fell to 2K like the next day. It fell like so. But I was gonna articulate on a point you mentioned earlier about people like with Wyoming and people moving to, increasing people to move there because of Bitcoin and whatnot. I was reading something pretty interesting. I think it was by Liberty Blitzkrieg on Twitter, Michael Krieger, and he's mentioned like the next decade, and I agree on this wholeheartedly after living in a smaller area for a while. He was talking about basically migration out of big cities, and I think that's going to happen. I think people are realizing that being stacked on top of each other isn't the best for human nature, and I think you're going to kind of see the anti-corporate, anti-metropolitan over the next decade. It might not be like people like my parents as much, but people my age more so, who just want to get away from what has been everyone else's parents and the grandparents before, moving to the big city, getting a job, and living in the suburb or living in the city. And I think that's something that will change for sure, especially as we continue to see cities struggle, especially like Chicago, for instance, with pensions.
Yeah.
I mean, there's in the unbearable amount of taxes you get. I think I was in Chicago for 2 days, and like the taxes, you just get everything after being in Montana where there's zero taxes, and you're like, what?
I deal with the same thing here in California, and it's on one hand you like just kind of get used to it. On the other hand, like I'm just furious all the time, and just like you said, I can't wait to either move to another state or have so much money that I don't care and I'll just stay in California and deal with it. But definitely would get myself like a little plot where there isn't anyone next to me, above me, below me, that kind of thing. I think you're 100% correct. And it's unfortunate because I'm sure some of the people who are already living in these, I don't want to say more rural, because I don't think that's the best way to put it, but smaller towns, small business kind of areas, they're not going to like the people that are going to move there, because they're going to have potentially different views on things, and what they like to do and what they don't like to do. That's why people live in the middle of nowhere and other people live in the city. So I think that, but I think that's a good point. I mean, realistically, it's me and my significant other, we do fine for a millennial couple, but like it's still expensive as fuck here. Like it's not like I'm gonna buy a house. Like I would love to move somewhere else to a different, cheaper state and have, a modest place with, a yard. Pool would be nice, little driveway, garage action. Maybe a little bit of land. That's not really too much to ask for because, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, everybody had their chance to have that, and it wasn't really a big deal, and very, very attainable. And now you need to like go to the city, make as much money as you can, and then get out while you still can with as much as you have left. And it's not easy. I'm not trying to complain or bitch about it. You just got to play the hand you're dealt, but it just is what it is.
Yeah, it's again. It feels, and I liberally that Michael Krieger, Liberty Blitzkrieg. He has a great blog. I highly recommend. If you can't, he's on Twitter, and he really does a good job. And I think you and I really agree on this. We were on the cusp of something big here. I don't know what it is, but it feels like everything is crashing into each other all at the same time. Whether you're talking geopolitics, macroeconomics. And you can talk stock market at all-time highs, pension crisis, interest rates at all-time lows. And then you could talk geopolitics where, like, if you told anyone even, I guess the election happened over 3 years ago now, shit. If you told anyone 3.5 years ago that Donald Trump would be the president of the United States, people would still be like, no way. Right. And you look at other countries, like Brazil with the far-right elected. I shouldn't say far-right because that's what the mainstream media always says. He's more conservative, Bolsonaro. And you look at other countries, like if you would have told me 2 years ago Paris would have been having protests week in, week out, you would have told me Hong Kong would be at basically war for 6 months, even a year ago, I would have been like, what are you talking about?
Right.
It feels like everything is just kind of crashing into each other, and it's all colliding and meeting at the same point, like I was talking with my dad and some other people the other night about it was this morning, Social Security and he was at the doctor's office, and the doctor's like, I'm voting for I'm not bringing politics, but he's like, I'm voting for Trump because he's so sick and tired of all the nonsense what the left in America is bringing in terms of just taxing everything to death, because we don't have any all their plans, like when you talk about Green New Deal, I don't mean to talk politics, that all relies on the ability to create free money. Oh, we're just gonna poof 90 trillion. Here's 90 trillion from the federal reserve. That's not how it works. And that would destroy our currency.
Right. No, and I think like all the things you brought up that are happening globally, whether it's protests, hyperinflation in Venezuela, inflation in Iran, all these other places.
Polarization of politics is one of them too.
Yeah, it's just, if you think that has nothing to do with the money, either like you're looking for an answer to something that it's like an unsolvable problem, because when the money gets so skewed, these are the kinds of things that happen. Exactly. And it's the only possible way that these can happen. You cannot fund wars for decades on end. You cannot fund I'd consider some of these the social programs to just unfortunately turn out to be malinvestment, because you're what do they say, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then there's not enough people to keep paying into it, and it ends up not working, and you didn't think you didn't make the returns that you needed to actually pay what you owe to people. Like, being able to extend credit past the total supply of gold, as an example, right? Like, this is when you start to get into these issues. And the funny part is, to me, is that people globally are kind of upset regardless of their political spectrum. They kind of know something's up. And I feel like it's like a couple thousand people on the planet who are like, I can't believe you guys aren't looking at the money as like the root cause of the issue. Because like none of it can be paid for or funded without the money. And even if you said like, if we had gold, none of this shit would be happening, because you just couldn't extend the credit as far to like let it happen. It would be impossible.
A perfect example be those papers the Washington Post reported the other day, which you and I always talk about all the time, is the Afghanistan war. And then that people high up long before, and Liberty Blitzkrieg comment on, but they knew that it was an unwinnable situation completely, yet we wasted trillions of dollars, few thousand service members' lives, And I don't know who I was mentioning. It might have been to you that like more soldiers are dying. U.S. soldiers, U.S. American soldiers are dying from PTSD than have died during, I guess you could say, the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, and then any pursuing, terrorist or global endeavors the U.S. has done in the past almost 20 years. It's a depressing statistic. Right. And it doesn't get any, and I don't mean to go off on this little tangent, but it doesn't get any conversation. It gets very little conversation in America. Sure, you hear about it, but whenever you think about sports games, it's all this patriotic shit with jets flying over, helicopters flying over, and there's no one saying, "Hey, what about those X amount of guys?" It's probably a few a day, if not more, that commit suicide from post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's like it doesn't get the talk that it should. And I don't mean to bring this in here, but it's like a perfect example of where we live in this fairy tale land of free money, and that we can just go on these massive endeavors, and the U.S. has 800 plus military bases worldwide. Like, people don't realize, like, even though we spend by far more than the top 10 countries on, our military budget, but the reason that is because we have 800 military bases worldwide, while other countries like Russia, China, Iran, India, you name it, are working on research and development, whether it's developing new firearms, new aircraft, new technology, you name it. We're spending so much money in different areas that aren't, increasing our potential. It's just that simple.
Yeah, and
free money,
kind of,
because you go all back to the money. We can print money. We can spend $1 trillion over in Afghanistan, no big deal. Or the Pentagon's $21 trillion that are missing.
Right, like nobody bats an eye at that stuff. And I think, like, kind of to wrap up and finish up on that, like, it gives me a lot of hope, because just as you said, like, a lot of this stuff, a lot of lives were lost, a lot of money wasted, that all of that value could have went into something else. And I think as the shift to a sound money becomes more obvious to everyone, that it's just like, I'm so bullish. Like, we've been really fucking up for like a couple decades here, and we got a chance to kind of get it all back, hopefully as peacefully as possible too, and really move the ball forward in terms of like just individual freedoms and liberty and being able to buy a home and store your wealth through time. Like, it's gotten so bad that, like, I'm just so bullish, because there's an option. There's something to move to, whether any kind of sound money, like, it is great for anybody right now. So I just think, when you go so far in the other direction, it's just a lot of opportunity to bring it back the other way. And, it's something to just at least not get too down about, but at least try to get excited for.
And I think, extending on your point there, whether it's people in the Bitcoin and crypto community, the gold bugs, the hard money people, the Austrian economics, the traders that, we see on FinTwit, I think everyone, is kind of coming behind this whole thing that things are getting really skewed. And we see it all the time on Twitter, where people are like, "Oh, the Fed's putting more money in the market," or the ECB is doing this, or etc. And it is good to see that people realize, and more people are using the term fiat than ever. And I think it's good, because people are starting to realize that they're, this past almost 50 years now, it's 48, 49, has been a giant farce of free money, and there is consequences for it. That's the unfortunate reality.
Yep. No, I think you nailed it. So make sure you guys out there who are listening, pay attention. Keep your ears to the ground, or when you keep hearing people talk about fiat money. That's a recent thing, and I think it's starting to catch steam. So
I'll say it really caught steam, I think, at the start of 2018, I think, really. Yeah. But you know what? Keep your eyes open, ears open.
Right. Play defense. All right, everybody. Well, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify. Make sure to shoot us a DM on Twitter or Instagram if you have any other topics that you'd like us to talk about. Thanks for all those who've sent us that. We do appreciate it. And be careful out there, stack sats, and get ready for the holidays. Yep. Peace.